Hey, Bayek, it's me Ian, and in today's video we're going to look at this. This is Sgt Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, really just often known as Sgt Pepper, and it is the Beatles, of course. And on the 26th of May 1967, this was released. It was most anticipated album that perhaps the Beatles had ever released. After the success of Revolver, there was this wait. Something was going on in the studio. There were all sorts of leaks coming out about what exactly was going on, and they produced this. And this is, without doubt, in my opinion, the Beatles' greatest album. Yes, I can hear people saying already, and this is something that you hear all the time. What about Revolver? What about Abbey Road? Yes, many people will say the pinnacle of Beatles music is Revolver and Abbey Road. Yeah, Abbey Road. But I would argue that this is the most important album that the Beatles ever did. And it's significantly important because it has a wider context. Much more than those other two albums, which are great albums. But this is perfection. There's not a bad track on this album. There's not a weak track. The others, Revolver and Abbey Road, do have tracks which are not as good. And the important thing you can even say in this is that Ringo Starr, who often, let's be honest, he does a song and it's not as good, but it's Ringo and everybody loves Ringo. But on here, he hits the jackpot. He sings a song that is so loved, which is Get By With a Little Help From Our Friends. And there he is, it's Ringo doing a song that is, everybody loves it. And it reflects what this album is all about, really, because there's not a bad track on this album. There's no fillers. It's perfect. For me, it is perfection. And it's exactly why the Beatles are so important. And this album is so important. It's got a wider context. And I love it. I love this album. And I can see why. It is such an important album. As I said, there's not a weak track on it, and it reflects the Beatles so much in terms of their musical influences. On this album, you've got the rock music, you've got psychedelic music, you've got a look back at the sort of vaudeville music hall styles. You've got all these musical influences, and they're all here in this album. I can't explain how much this means to me as well. When I hear this, it reaffirms my belief in music being such a wonderful art form when it all comes together and works well. And I think there's kind of a revisionism there has been over years, that maybe people have been a bit more down on this. Sometimes when things are so good, there's critics and people who perhaps just want to say, hey, it's not as good, but it is. It is. Yes, it is superior to Revolver and Abbey Road. Without doubt in my mind, this is a great album. Everything comes together. And significantly, it was the anticipation that this album had was rewarded. Everybody was talking about this album, and you can see why. It is in many ways a concept album as well. That something that would become so important and would lead to prog rock ideas. Yes, but this album is not a niche album. It encompasses all the sort of British traditions, and it's all here. Even the cover. Yes, this cover art. They're here. Is brilliant. How many artists really took the time to concentrate on covers? A cover is seen, it was a cover, picture of the band and what have you, but they then are saying, look, I mean, the cover of Revolver is outstanding, but this suddenly becomes iconic again. A brilliant cover. And people saying, yes, now this is an important part of the album as well, the cover. Yes. It's interesting that they kind of go anti-cover in terms of the White Album, and which is, but the White Album is such a, it's another story in itself, the White Album. But if you was to ask me what is the best and my favourite Beatles album, it is this. You just cannot beat this album, in my opinion. Everything about it, all those songs. It's a journey. The album is a journey as well, and a reflection of the culture of the time. And as I said, I believe that this is a concept album, and its significance was not missed by people, other musicians who thought, hey, this is a good idea. This is a good idea. But to encompass the roots of music as well is absolutely amazing. And the Beatles came from an interesting tradition, because when they were working in Hamburg, hard working, all their music came from rock and roll. And that is an important part of the band, the rock and roll tradition, the rock tradition. Whereas a lot of bands in the 60s were looking at the blues tradition, the American blues tradition. So you get that as well. Look at the Rolling Stones, the great, considered in many ways a great rival. Their tradition is very, very different from the Beatles. They are the blues. They come from the blues, the Rolling Stones. So that's where they came from. It's also interesting. The Beatles also are very working class. They come from a working class tradition as well. The Stones were not. That's another point. So there's so many important things about the Beatles, and the culmination of all that comes in their greatest album that they produced, and which is Sgt Pepper. There's not a bad track. There's not a weak track at all. Everything just comes together so well. And it's an absolute delight and treat. I say, you've got all these musical influences. You've even got Eastern influences with Indian music through George Harrison. And I say, you've got Paul McCartney doing When I'm 64. which is the vaudeville music hall influences and the rock stuff, and then the psychedelic. I mean, what a brilliant track to end this album on, A Day in the Life. Wow, you can look at that track, one epic way. And it just shows you, as I've said, there is not one weak track or filler or anything on this album. Everything comes together brilliantly. And I love this album. The more I've been looking at it this week, playing it, seeing it more, it reinforces all that. As I said, it stands tall, and it's a cultural album because the context is much wider. It's not just a group of musicians putting together an album and creating a work of art. Albums are a work of art, and in many ways, an album like this enabled groups and artists as well, singers, to look at the album differently. It wasn't just putting the singles on that there and then filling it up with other tracks that maybe weren't as good. This showed you that an album is the work of art, and that all the other tracks should be part of it. It's an experience. You put this album on and enjoy the. You're not just waiting for the standout singles, the singles that people know. No, the album track is part of the album. It's not a filler. And this is what this album shows so well. And I think it should get even more praise, I think, really. And as I say, people are going to, I can hear them shouting, Revolver, Abbey Road. But no, this is the Beatles' finest. This is the greatest album. And it's one of the, if you look at the history of albums and the development of music, this is an important part of that. You can point out certain classic albums that follow those patterns, and this will always be in there, definitely. Its context is much wider, and I mean, it's a great experience. I love it, absolutely love it, and I never tire of it. And again, that's another good thing. Sometimes when you love something and you play it and play it, you can overdo it. You can overdo it. But this, it's a wonderful journey. I notice I'm using the word journey because that's what it is. It's just a musical journey by a band who know exactly what they were doing. They were pushing. They were using the studio as well more now. They were seeing, because the Beatles had stopped touring. They got fed up with touring. It was perhaps draining their creativity as well. I mean, Revolver is a great album, but they were fed up. They were tired. They'd had enough, and they wanted to explore other areas in music that they hadn't been able to. And with George Martin, they were able to use the recording studio and bring out more than just as a place to record what they're doing. They could use it to enhance what they were doing, using techniques, using various layers of sound, all coming together to produce this. Fantastic. And I think it's important to remember that. And it's made me realize why I love this album even more. There's certain perfection. Everything, when the magic happens, that's what it is. Everything comes together. There's nothing in its way whatsoever. And this album reflects that. I absolutely love it. And if you've not heard it, please go and listen to it, though you might not feel the same way as I do about it. But it's just my personal opinion. But it's why I think that this is the Beatles' greatest album and why I love it. And that's it, really. I cannot help but love this album. And yeah, well, I think I've gone on a bit about it, but hope you've enjoyed my look at it. And yeah, the Beatles' greatest album. Yes. So that's it. Yeah. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, and we'll let you know when I put out videos. I cover all sorts, a lot of film, TV, and say some music, collecting, often with a nostalgic feel. And if you like this video, please give the video a like. It gets it out to YouTube so other people might enjoy it. And so look in the playlists and you can see all the kind of things that I do. So and that's it, really. I've been babbling on far too long. Yeah, if you got any comments, please put your comments down as well. I'll always reply to them. And that's it. Yes. So all I've got to say is, I'll see thee again.